Shalom Alaikum. Mikael again. Morning Reflections, April 14, 2014. Abib 14, 59.99. Yeah, pretty deep situations going on in Kansas City. Leading up into this festival of Passover, as the Jewish community was rocked by a hate crime, a shooting at the Jewish community center, which left 3 dead, and the community in trauma leading up to the holy days for those who observe the Torah. Very, very morbid situation, and not to discount the realities of anyone else, but of course we know a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The perpetrator of the crime was a former Grand Dragon of the Imperial Ku Klux Klan. I believe he's a 72-year-old man, and carried out the crime. Know that he's not alone. Know that he is not alone. There are many cells of terrorist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan that are active in the United States of America. As a matter of fact, the Ku Klux Klan being one of the original, if not the original terrorist. So, very unfortunate circumstance, but that's not going to take up the heart of today's reflection. Today's reflection is, of course, going to be about what this evening entails. At the evening of today, we will commence with the festival of Passover, which will lead into the festival of unleavened bread, a 7-day period that commemorates both the liberation of Israel out of the land of bondage of Mitzrayim, Kemet, some may call it, or Egypt. Pesach and unleavened bread and first fruits also commemorating the death, burial, and resurrection of the true Lamb of Elohim, who is Yahushua ben Yosef, Baruch Hashem. So just want to give some reflections and parallels about the actual day and the moment in the week-long festival that we're about to observe this evening. Of course, we know scriptures speak of Israel descending into Egypt with 70 people, being the descendants of Jacob, his 11 sons, because Yosef, whose name was changed to Zaphnath Paneah, was actually the vizier to the Pharaoh in Mitzrayim, Egypt. And after after probably about 3 or 4 generations after all of that generation, Yosef, his children, Ephraim and Manasseh, and more than likely their children had died out, it is said that a Pharaoh arose that did not know them, or did not know Yosef, and enslaved the children of Israel. Well, there's some conditions that have to be understood that precede this event that led up to this enslavement. One, you have to understand Yosef was a very shrewd man, but in his shrewdness to save Mitzrayim from a 7-year famine, he had to actually resort to some very drastic measures, which was taking land and ultimately indenturing individuals into servitude so that they may receive their ration of food for survival. That left many of the Mitzrites somewhat unsettled, grumpy, but survival was number one, so they had to do what they had to do. Also, there were some wars going on in the continent of Africa, in which there were some Edomite tribes and other tribes surrounding Mitzrayim, which was a very mighty kingdom at the time, that had taken place. And the book of Yashar, or the book of Jasher, as it is pronounced in some circles, talks about Israel actually being successful in some of the campaigns against these nations, and waging war successfully to actually defeat these adversaries that have been coming to attempt to conquest Mitzrayim in its power. But it also speaks of how many of the Mitzrites had retreated in battle against the Israelites, and Israel was like, you're leaving us out here for our heads. So they ended up going against them and slaying them with the sword. But the thing that really became of notice was the might of the Israelite nation in war. You read in the book of Exodus how, I believe even in the first chapter, how Pharaoh says, these are becoming a mighty people. We need to enslave them lest they actually join with our enemies and overtake us. But you have to contextualize that, and the book of Jasher actually provides an excellent context of that. And so by trickery, they went about building fort cities and enlisting these Israelites into labor with the Mitzrites at the time. But eventually the Mitzrite labor was completely withdrawn, and Israel was forced to be enslaved to go about building these cities for nothing. And the cruelty of the slavery, the enslavement even, shall I say, not slavery, the enslavement that Israel experienced was beyond anything that they had experienced prior to that, to the point where they were forced to throw their babies in the river. We know that is spoken of, the death of the firstborn, in the expectation of the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu, our rabbi Moses. And then also, as they were building walls, they were forced to put their children in the walls and to cement over the walls. The book of Jasher records this, and the children at times would be heard crying from inside the walls, and many other heinous crimes that the Mitzrites had carried out against these Israelite ancestors, our Israelite ancestors. So long story short, just getting around to it, this enslavement became very harsh. Moshe is found, of course, by the daughter of Pharaoh, and he is reared up in the household and learned in all the ways of the Mitzrites and all the wisdom. Then he actually is sent back to his mother prior to being completely reared, but his mother actually had a hand in nursing and weaning him from milk, as Pharaoh's daughter was not pregnant and could not nurse, so she gave him back to a Hebrew, his mother, whose name was Jochebed, as Miriam had been in the mix, his sister, and had found ways to bring him back to the family and have him nursed. So he had something instilled in him at that early age, which later became evident when he saw the Mitzrite overseer mercilessly beating one of his Israelite brethren who was, supposed to do labor. And the scriptures record that Moshe became a murderer and that he murdered the Mitzrite overseer, which had him flee into the actual wilderness, where he found his wife Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, of Midian, where he then had access back to many of his cultural ways as a Hebrew, and where he found his staff, the staff that even said that Adam had, with the name of Yah written on it, which was a sapphire stone, a staff made of sapphire stone. And so, as the story goes, he encounters Yah while in the wilderness looking for one of his sheep that had gotten away at the burning bush, where Yah proclaims, Ehyeh Asher, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I am who I am. And he told him that his memorial name, his name for all time, would be the Yod He Wah He Tetragrammaton. And so from there, he sent on a mission to tell Pharaoh, let his people go, so that they may worship him on the mountain that he has chosen, which of course is Mount Sinai. And so we see Moshe step into this role, not getting into much of the detail, but he stepped into this role and went to Pharaoh with his brother Aaron, who became the first high priest of the nation of Israel, where he demanded his people to be freed from enslavement at the chagrin of Pharaoh, whose heart was hardened so that Yah's name may be esteemed throughout all of the region, because Egypt, being the most mighty kingdom of that time, was soon to face a terrible blow through 10 plagues that ended with the death of the firstborn, which paralleled the death of those children, or the slaughter of the innocents that took place at Moshe's birth. And so we also have this parallel with the Passover lamb and the unleavened bread being prepared in haste, the bread of haste, as a result of Israel fleeing out of Egypt, so that they may go into the wilderness and serve the Father at the mountain that he has chosen, and become the nation that they were destined to be, to lead all the nations and to the light of truth and spirit of who the Most High is. And so they were told on this last night, which will take place tonight, to slaughter a lamb that had been taken aside from on the 10th day and preserved for this particular moment, to slaughter it, put the blood on the lintels and the threshold, so that the messenger of death shall pass over their house and not take their firstborn. And so, being obedient in the land of Goshen, where they were, where none of the plagues actually touched any of the Israelites, to distinguish between Israel and Mitzrayim, and to show that Yah is truly Elohim. This event took place in which Israel was released from captivity and bondage. And that is pretty much the basis of the Passover story. Of course, you have the parting of the Red Sea, and then the 40-year excursion in the wilderness. But this also parallels to about 33 of the current era, when a man from Nazareth was taken and betrayed by one of his very own, who had expected a different type of king and a different type of kingdom. And he was put before the high priest, Caiaphas, taken before Pontius Pilate, who declared and rendered him innocent. But it was said that let his blood be on us and on our children. And so at that same hour in which the lamb was taken and slaughtered in Egypt and in the temple of Jerusalem every successive year, from their going into the land of Egypt, into the promised land, and to this very moment in 33 on Abib of 14, at evening, There was a man slaughtered. There was a man who was impaled. There was a man who was crucified, whose blood was shed for the atonement of many and all who would receive him, which was the ultimate fulfillment of this. And it's interesting to parallel, because you can see the Passover even prior to the Exodus experience with Abraham and Yitzhak, Avraham and Yitzhak, Isaac, when Abraham was told to make a sacrifice, right? And he was to bring his son up on Mount Moriah, which is Mount Zion. And as he was about to lay the sword to him, he was told, stop. But it's so interesting, because when Isaac was willingly going to allow himself to be offered, he asked him, Father, we have the knife for the slaughter and the wood and the stone and fire for the altar. Where's the lamb? Where's the lamb? His father Abraham replied, Yah will provide the lamb, son. Have no worries. Yah will provide the lamb. And so right about the time when he was about to bring the knife down, Abraham heard a voice telling him to stop. Look in the thicket. There was a ram caught in the thicket, which was used for an offering. But the symbolism of what they call the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac, was very foreshadowing of the ultimate offering that Yah would eventually receive and allow to be done, so that all men might receive atonement. And this is what is called a stumbling block to many of the Yehudim. It is also called foolishness to the Greeks, or to the Gentile. But to Yah, it is his power of deliverance and redemption and salvation. And so tonight, I pray that we're all very reflective of what event transpired, both in Mitzrayim and our deliverance from physical bondage, and on Golgotha with our deliverance from spiritual bondage, sin and death, which Yah overcame in his Redeemer, in his servant, in his Mashiach, in his Messiah. When he, during the unleavened bread period, rose on the festival of first fruits, where he became the first fruit from the dead, risen by the power alone of Elohim, and had loosed the captives that had also been seized by the power of death, which had come to all men at that moment that he rose from the grave and claimed all power in heaven and on earth through the inheritance that he received from being obedient, which is the whole essence of what the true worship of Yah, the Elohim of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov is about. Obedience, love, which allows us to truly experience the covenant that has been promised to the people of Israel, which will be the light to the Gentiles. So I pray that these reflections have been insightful to you all and edifying, encouraging. It is a very sober hour that we are in, and there's much that we are dealing with as humanity against inhumanity, because there are very, very, very treacherous people out here today who have no intention to see the light of truth and the light of justice and the light of righteousness and the light of mercy and compassion to spread. So do your part as I strive to do mine. And so with that, I pray that you all have a blessed day, a blessed Passover Seder for you all who are observing. And for those of you who are not yet aware of this particular matter, may Yah lead you into all truth and reveal to you how to serve him in spirit and truth. So with that, may Yah bless and keep you. May Yah lift up his face unto you and shine his countenance upon you. And may Yah show you his face and give you peace. One love. Shalom Aleichem. Chag Sameach.